From the mid-1970s into the early 1980s, Little House on the Prairie became one of the most recognizable and emotionally resonant television series in America. Airing on NBC from 1974 to 1983, it was more than just a family drama set in the 19th century Midwest. It became a weekly ritual for millions of households. Inspired by the autobiographical books of Laura Ingalls Wilder, the series followed the Ingalls family as they navigated the hardships and small triumphs of frontier life in the fictional town of Walnut Grove. At its core, the show balanced simplicity with emotional depth, portraying poverty, resilience, love, and moral struggle in ways that felt accessible yet profoundly affecting. Michael Landon, who played Charles Ingalls, was not only the face of the series but also one of its primary creative forces, serving as writer, director, and executive producer for many episodes. Alongside him, a young Melissa Gilbert, who portrayed Laura Ingalls, anchored the emotional journey of the series as it evolved over nearly a decade. What began as a modest historical drama gradually transformed into a cultural touchstone, blending family-friendly storytelling with surprisingly bold explorations of social issues. Its appeal spanned generations, often watched together by parents and children alike. The show's legacy is complicated by its emotional intensity and willingness to confront difficult realities under the guise of nostalgia. While often remembered for its warmth and moral lessons, it also carried a surprising weight of tragedy and realism. This combination of comfort and discomfort is what ultimately made it endure long after its final episode aired, ensuring that Walnut Grove remained alive in public memory long after its physical set ceased to exist. From page to screen and the creation of Walnut Grove. The origins of Little House on the Prairie lie in Laura Ingalls Wilder's semi-autobiographical novels, which chronicled her childhood experiences growing up in a pioneer family during the late 19th century. When the series was adapted for television, it was not a direct, literal translation of the books, but rather a reimagined interpretation designed for a broad television audience. The adaptation process involved shaping episodic narratives that could blend historical authenticity with dramatic storytelling suitable for weekly broadcast television. Executive producer Ed Friendly acquired the rights to the books and partnered with Michael Landon, who had already established himself as a television star through Bonanza, to develop the series. Landon's influence quickly became central, as he reshaped the tone of the show into something more emotionally expressive and character-driven. Walnut Grove itself became a symbolic space, representing both the promise and hardship of American frontier life. Though geographically fictional, it felt grounded in real human experiences that resonated deeply with viewers. Casting was critical to the show's success. Michael Landon's portrayal of Charles Ingalls brought a sense of steady moral authority, while Melissa Gilbert's performance as Laura provided emotional immediacy and growth over time. Supporting characters such as Caroline Ingalls, played by Karen Grassel, added depth to the family dynamic. Together, the ensemble created a believable world where each episode could explore new challenges without losing its sense of continuity or emotional realism. This foundation helped the series grow beyond its literary roots into a cultural phenomenon. The rise of a cultural staple in the 1970s. By the mid to late 1970s, Little House on the Prairie had firmly established itself as one of television's most watched family dramas. At a time when American television was increasingly diversifying into urban-centered comedies and socially edgy programming, Little House offered something different: a return to simplicity, morality, and rural life. Yet beneath its nostalgic surface, the show was far more complex than it initially appeared. Each episode typically followed a self-contained story, often centered on a moral or social dilemma faced by the Ingalls family or their neighbors. These stories frequently addressed themes such as poverty, illness, discrimination, and personal sacrifice. The emotional accessibility of these narratives made the show appealing to a wide demographic. Families could watch together, and the stories often sparked conversations about values, fairness, and resilience. The chemistry between cast members contributed significantly to its success. Michael Landon's presence provided continuity and emotional grounding, while Melissa Gilbert's growth from child to young adult mirrored the passage of time within the series itself. The town of Walnut Grove became a familiar place for viewers, almost like a second home. At its peak, the show consistently ranked among the most popular programs on American television, cementing its place in the cultural landscape of the decade. Characters, performances, and emotional anchors. One of the defining strengths of Little House on the Prairie was its deeply human cast of characters, each of whom contributed to the emotional fabric of Walnut Grove. Michael Landon's Charles Ingalls was portrayed as a steadfast, compassionate father figure, embodying moral strength and quiet determination. His character often served as the emotional anchor of the series, guiding his family through adversity with patience and resolve. Melissa Gilbert's portrayal of Laura Ingalls provided the narrative's evolving perspective. As she matured over the series' run, viewers witnessed her transformation from a spirited child into a complex young woman navigating love, loss, and responsibility. This long-term character development was unusual for television at the time and contributed significantly to the show's emotional depth. Karen Grassel's Caroline Ingalls added another layer of grounding realism. Her portrayal of a resilient pioneer mother, balancing domestic life with emotional endurance, helped shape the show's portrayal of frontier family dynamics. Supporting cast members, including Alison Arngrim as Nellie Oleson, brought contrast and tension, often serving as antagonistic forces that highlighted the Ingalls family's values. Together, these performances created a richly textured world where emotional stakes felt real, even within episodic storytelling. Themes of hardship, humanity, and social commentary. While Little House on the Prairie is often remembered for its warmth and nostalgia, its storytelling frequently ventured into darker and more complex territory than many family shows of its era. The series did not shy away from depicting hardship, whether through illness, disability, economic struggle, or moral conflict. These themes were not treated superficially. Instead, they were woven into the fabric of the characters' lives in ways that emphasized emotional realism. Episodes such as Kill Sylvia became particularly notable for their intense and sometimes controversial subject matter, addressing issues such as assault and trauma with a level of seriousness uncommon in family television at the time. Other episodes explored racism, addiction, and social exclusion, often placing the characters in morally difficult situations that required empathy and difficult decision-making rather than simple resolution. This willingness to engage with uncomfortable realities distinguished the series from other family dramas of its era. Rather than presenting an idealized version of frontier life, it acknowledged the emotional and physical struggles that came with it. In doing so, the show created a unique balance between comfort viewing and moral reflection, allowing audiences to engage with serious topics within a familiar and emotionally safe narrative structure. Creative control and behind-the-scenes tensions. As the series progressed, Michael Landon's influence over Little House on the Prairie became increasingly dominant. Serving as star, writer, director, and executive producer, he maintained a level of creative control that shaped nearly every aspect of the show's production. While this allowed for a consistent vision, it also created tension behind the scenes, particularly with other creative stakeholders involved in the series' development. Ed Friendly, who had originally acquired the rights to Laura Ingalls Wilder's books, was one of the key figures involved in the early stages of production. However, as Landon's authority expanded, differences in creative direction and control reportedly emerged. The shift toward Landon-centered storytelling gave the series a strong personal imprint, but also reduced the collaborative balance that had initially shaped its development. This centralization of creative power influenced not only production decisions, but also narrative tone and character focus. Episodes increasingly reflected Landon's storytelling sensibilities, emphasizing emotional resolution and moral clarity. While this consistency contributed to the show's identity, it also led to behind-the-scenes friction that would later become part of the broader narrative surrounding the series' production history. Cast, relationships, and off-screen challenges. Behind the idyllic portrayal of Walnut Grove, the relationships among cast members were not always as harmonious as they appeared on screen. Over the years, tensions occasionally emerged, particularly concerning compensation, screen time, and creative recognition. Karen Grassel, who portrayed Caroline Ingalls, was among those who later spoke about disputes regarding pay equity and professional respect during the show's run. These tensions reflected broader industry dynamics of the time, where actors, particularly women, often had limited leverage in negotiating contracts and creative input. While the series maintained a strong public image of unity and family values, the realities of long-term television production inevitably created friction among cast and crew members working under intense schedules and evolving creative demands. Despite these challenges, many of the core cast relationships remained professional and, in some cases, deeply personal. The intensity of the filming schedule and the emotional demands of the storytelling often blurred the line between performance and lived experience, creating bonds that were complex and multifaceted. These dynamics added another layer of depth to the show's legacy, revealing the contrast between on-screen harmony and off-screen complexity. Michael Landon's personal life and its impact. Michael Landon's personal life became a subject of public attention during and after the show's run, particularly due to his relationship with Cindy Clerico, a makeup artist on the series. At the time, Landon was still married, and the relationship reportedly created emotional strain both within his family and among members of the production team. This development added a layer of real-world complexity to a show often associated with moral clarity and traditional family values. For Melissa Gilbert, who had developed a close mentor-like bond with Landon during her formative years on the show, the situation was particularly difficult. She later described feeling a sense of personal betrayal, and the emotional distance between them lasted for years. Their eventual reconciliation, shortly before Landon's death in 1991, added a bittersweet dimension to their shared history, reflecting the complicated intersection of professional admiration and personal disappointment. Landon's personal choices did not diminish his creative impact on the series, but they did contribute to a more nuanced understanding of him as both an artist and individual. His legacy became inseparable from both his work and his personal narrative, reflecting the complexities often hidden behind successful television production, bold storytelling, and social relevance in episodic form. Despite its reputation as a wholesome family drama, Little House on the Prairie frequently addressed serious and sometimes controversial social issues. The show's willingness to explore topics such as racial prejudice, disability, illness, and violence set it apart from many of its contemporaries. These stories were often framed within the context of frontier life, but their themes resonated strongly with modern audiences. Episodes dealing with discrimination and injustice challenged viewers to consider moral questions in ways that were accessible but not simplistic. The show often placed its characters in situations where easy answers were not available, forcing them to confront ethical dilemmas with empathy and resilience. This narrative approach allowed the series to function not only as entertainment, but also as a form of social reflection. The emotional intensity of these episodes sometimes surprised audiences expecting lighter fare. However, this willingness to engage with difficult subject matter contributed significantly to the show's lasting impact. It demonstrated that family television could address serious issues without losing its accessibility, paving the way for future series to explore similar thematic complexity within mainstream formats. Decline in ratings and the decision to conclude. By the early 1980s, Little House on the Prairie began to experience a gradual decline in viewership. After nearly a decade on the air, audience tastes had shifted, and the television landscape was becoming increasingly competitive. New genres and formats were emerging, and long-running family dramas faced greater challenges in maintaining consistent ratings. NBC ultimately decided that the series had reached the natural end of its broadcast life cycle. While not cancelled abruptly due to controversy or scandal, the show was effectively concluded because it had run its course creatively and commercially. This decision allowed the production team to plan a more definitive ending rather than allowing the series to fade without resolution. Michael Landon, however, chose to approach the conclusion in a dramatic and symbolic way. Rather than leaving Walnut Grove intact for potential reuse or nostalgia-driven revisits, he opted for a final narrative act that would permanently close its story. This decision would lead directly into one of the most memorable and emotionally charged finales in television history, ensuring that the series ended with impact rather than quiet dissolution. The destruction of Walnut Grove and the final farewell. In the 1984 television movie Little House, The Last Farewell, the story of Walnut Grove came to a dramatic and unforgettable conclusion. Facing a land baron intent on seizing the town's property, the residents of Walnut Grove ultimately chose to destroy their own home rather than allow it to be taken and repurposed. In a striking and emotionally charged sequence, they detonated the town with dynamite, reducing its buildings, including the schoolhouse, church, and mercantile, to rubble. The production made the bold decision to physically destroy the existing set, using real explosives to bring the fictional town to a definitive end. This choice gave the scene a visceral authenticity that resonated deeply with audiences. Rather than relying on miniature effects or symbolic storytelling alone, the